Imagine a world where every nation, every ruler, and every major institution has a silent supervisor, an angel not sent to protect individuals or deliver messages, but to oversee the fate of entire kingdoms. These aren't the fiery seraphim who bask in the glory of God's throne, nor the warrior archangels who descend to battle darkness head-on. These are the principalities, angels of governance, structure, and divine order. You won't find them leading charges into battle or whispering prophecies into the ears of prophets. Their presence is quieter, more methodical, but their influence? Monumental. They're the ones ensuring that the gears of human civilization turn according to divine intent, or, at the very least, that they're given a chance to. They don't dictate every outcome, but they guide from the background, nudging, correcting, and occasionally abandoning a nation entirely if it turns from the divine path. Throughout history, theologians and mystics believed that each principality was assigned to a specific region, ruler, or institution. If chaos rises within a kingdom, it may be because its principality has withdrawn. If a just ruler appears seemingly out of nowhere, some believe it's because a principality acted. This is the story of the principalities, the angels behind the rise and fall of nations, empires, and civilization. The principalities were not the first angels to be created, nor were they the last. Positioned within the third sphere, the lowest of heaven's three great divisions, they were brought into existence for a very specific purpose: to manage the affairs of the earthly realm on a grand scale. Where the seraphim exist to burn with love for God and the thrones serve as vessels of divine justice, the principalities were born out of necessity. As the divine plan unfolded and humanity began to spread across the earth, so too did the structures of civilization, kingdoms, cities, laws, rulers, and with that, the need arose for order that extended beyond human understanding. That's where the principalities stepped in. They were created to serve as a divine link between heaven and the systems of the world. Each principality was given oversight over something immense: an empire, a nation, a ruling house, or even a sacred institution. They were meant to ensure that the will of God could be reflected through human leadership, that justice and righteousness could be preserved even within flawed earthly systems. But they were not micromanagers. Principalities weren't designed to intervene constantly. They don't control free will. Instead, they act more like spiritual governors, maintaining balance, guiding rulers with gentle nudges, and removing divine favor when corruption takes hold. Some traditions believe that principalities have existed since the days of Eden, but only took on their current responsibilities after the formation of the first cities and kingdoms. When Cain built a city, when Nimrod founded Babel, when Pharaoh rose in Egypt, that's when the role of principality became essential, when governance became more than a personal matter and became a system. Principalities are not often described in great detail like the seraphim or cherubim, but when they do appear in theological writings or mystical visions, they're typically depicted with an unmistakable sense of nobility and structured elegance. These are not wild, burning beings or beast-like hybrids. They embody control, authority, and composure. They are often shown adorned in royal or priestly garments, symbolic of their governance over rulers and institutions. Flowing robes, deep hues of gold, white or indigo, and emblems of sovereignty, crowns, scepters, and orbs are common motifs. In some interpretations, they wear laurel wreaths as a symbol of moral victory and divine approval. Others describe them with scrolls or books, underscoring their role in guiding human law and policy through divine insight. Unlike higher angels whose wings can be massive and overwhelming, the wings of principalities are often portrayed as modest but refined, structured, symmetrical, and luminous, with calm light rather than blazing fire. Their appearance gives off a sense of spiritual authority, not intimidation. Their faces are serene and steady, sometimes expressionless, designed not to evoke emotion, but to inspire reverence. Some traditions describe their eyes as glowing or veiled, not to hide secrets, but to symbolize their watchfulness over entire peoples, not individuals. And perhaps most striking is how their presence is often described in vision literature. Not awe-inspiring like the seraphim, not terrifying like the thrones, but commanding. When a principality appears, there is no chaos. Everything feels ordered, balanced, and temporarily free of corruption. They do not demand attention like other angels. They simply exist with purpose, and that alone is enough to shift the atmosphere. Principalities serve as the spiritual administrators of heaven's will, agents of divine order placed over rulers, nations, and large-scale institutions. While they don't wield swords like archangels or whisper personal guidance like angels, their power lies in influence, subtle, expansive, and enduring. As mentioned before, their primary role is to govern, not in the political sense, but in the spiritual one. Every empire, kingdom, or governing body that rises under the sun is said to be observed, if not directly managed, by a principality. They guide the moral compass of leaders, inspire systems of justice, and create spiritual conditions that allow a society to thrive. When a leader acts in accordance with divine principles, it's often said a principality is near. When injustice spreads unchecked, the angel may have withdrawn, or worse, been replaced by something fallen. They also help to structure and support religious institutions, ensuring that sacred traditions stay aligned with divine will. Where dominions pass commands from the higher spheres and archangels deliver messages to the people, principalities translate heaven's order into functional frameworks, law, hierarchy, culture. Principalities are calm, deliberate, and precise. Unlike more fiery orders, they don't act out of emotion. They work with patience, fully aware that nations and empires rise and fall over centuries. Their influence isn't about immediacy, it's about legacy. They are not reactive, but proactive. Not confrontational, but decisive. If they step away from a corrupted nation, they don't do so with rage. They do it because the divine mission has already been compromised. They rarely speak, but when they do, their voice is said to carry the weight of policy and purpose, like a divine proclamation echoing through the halls of power. Their powers revolve around macro-scale influence. They can instill divine wisdom into rulers and advisors, shift the spiritual atmosphere of a city or nation, strengthen or destabilize institutions based on divine alignment, shield societies from external spiritual corruption when aligned with God's will, and in rare cases, remove divine favor entirely, leading to collapse, conquest, or chaos. Unlike angels and archangels, principalities do not operate on the individual level. Where angels comfort and archangels protect, principalities govern. They are detached from personal affairs and act with the distance of administrators, not out of coldness, but out of necessity. Where angels touch hearts and archangels rally faith, principalities steer history. Throughout history, rulers have risen and fallen. Cities have turned into empires, and empires have collapsed into dust. But according to ancient theological thought, none of this happened without being observed, if not subtly shaped, by the principalities. These angels weren't just silent witnesses to the march of history. They were assigned to it. Each principality was believed to be responsible for guiding the soul of a nation, the spiritual health of a government, or even the moral compass of a ruling dynasty. When a kingdom rose in justice and stability, it was seen as a reflection of a principality doing its work. When corruption festered, tyrants seized power, or nations fell into ruin, it was often interpreted as a sign that the principality had withdrawn or had been pushed out by human wickedness. In the earliest days, theologians believed principalities were active during the birth of nations like Egypt, Babylon, Persia, and Rome. These empires weren't just historical anomalies. They were part of a divine timeline, guided in part by angelic hands. Not because they were perfect, but because they played a role in a larger plan. A nation might rise to spread justice, preserve knowledge, or pave the way for prophecy. But when it lost its alignment with divine will, its protection could be revoked. Some scholars argue that even the concept of divine right in monarchy, the belief that kings and queens are chosen by God, may have roots in the unseen presence of principalities. They don't choose rulers directly, but they are said to nudge the moral and spiritual environment around leadership, pushing it toward justice or allowing it to fall into ruin. And their influence isn't just tied to governments. Principalities have also been associated with the rise of religious movements, the spread of philosophy, and even the preservation of language and culture. Anything that helps shape the identity and legacy of a people could fall under their supervision. But here's the catch: they do not force outcomes. Principalities guide, they don't override human will. When people choose corruption, oppression, or violence, the principalities may step aside. And when that happens, history tends to shift. Hard. Cities burn, regimes collapse, order gives way to chaos. It's not punishment, it's the natural consequence of a structure losing its spiritual support. So the next time you study the fall of an empire or the sudden rise of a moral leader in a time of darkness, ask yourself, was something or someone divine working quietly behind the scenes? Hey everyone, just a quick intermission here. I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Did you know that over 80% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed to the channel? If you've enjoyed this content so far, it would be incredible if you could hit that subscribe button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel grow and ensures that you won't miss any more of our fascinating stories we explore together. Also, if you're feeling generous, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share with anyone else who may enjoy it. Your support really does make a difference and keeps the content coming. Thanks again, and let's get back to the story. The clearest glimpse we get of principalities in action or in conflict comes from the book of Daniel, specifically Daniel chapter 10. It's one of the most mysterious and debated passages in all of Scripture, describing not just a prophetic vision, but a behind-the-scenes spiritual battle unfolding alongside earthly events. In the vision, Daniel is visited by a radiant heavenly being. Most scholars believe it was either the archangel Gabriel or another high-ranking messenger. The angel explains that he had been delayed for 21 days because he was contending with the prince of the kingdom of Persia. Not a human prince, but a spiritual one, clearly powerful enough to resist an angelic being. Later, the angel says, "And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when I have gone forth, indeed the prince of Greece will come." These princes are widely interpreted by theologians and mystics as principalities, not the holy ones but fallen ones. Spirits assigned to oversee kingdoms like Persia and Greece who had turned away from divine order and become obstacles to God's will. They weren't just passive observers of political regimes, they were directly influencing them. This passage shattered the assumption that all angelic beings assigned to nations remained loyal. It introduced the idea that principalities could fall, and when they did, their influence could corrupt entire kingdoms. The prince of Persia wasn't attacking Daniel, it was resisting the delivery of truth. It was trying to delay a divine message meant to prepare God's people for what was coming. The reference to the prince of Greece adds another layer, suggesting that this wasn't a one-off event. There's a pattern. Kingdoms rise with angelic guidance, and some of those guides can become adversaries. This chapter also quietly introduces a cosmic structure to human history. The rise of nations isn't just geopolitical, it's spiritual. And Daniel, standing in the middle of it all, is given a brief, terrifying glimpse behind the curtain. Principalities, once assumed to be stabilizers of order, were now seen as potential saboteurs when corrupted. Their fall didn't just lead to personal rebellion, it had global consequences. And yet it's also a reassurance, because even when a principality goes rogue, heaven doesn't abandon the field. Archangels step in, battles are fought, messages still reach the faithful. What Daniel saw wasn't just prophecy. It was proof that there is always more at play than meets the eye, and that even nations are part of a spiritual war far older than any human crown. The idea that angels could fall isn't new. Lucifer's rebellion is perhaps the most well-known tale of celestial defiance. But what's often overlooked is that he didn't fall alone, and he didn't just take warriors or watchers with him. He took rulers. He took principalities. Unlike the shock and drama of Lucifer's descent, the fall of a principality is usually more gradual. These angels weren't designed to rebel in violence. They were created to guide, to stabilize, to maintain order. But when the desire for control grows too strong, when power becomes an end in itself rather than a tool for divine justice, something shifts. Some principalities began to see themselves not as stewards, but as kings. They no longer reflected divine will. They tried to impose their own. Instead of elevating leaders to act righteously, they whispered flatteries. Instead of restraining empires from becoming cruel, they encouraged conquest, oppression, and fear. In time, their influence became a curse. These fallen principalities are often referred to as territorial spirits in later theology and spiritual writings. Beings who still hold sway over regions or systems, but no longer with divine sanction. They twist governance into tyranny, institutions into instruments of control, and patriotism into idolatry. In modern theology and spiritual warfare doctrine, these beings are sometimes invoked to explain the persistence of certain evils that seem larger than any single person. Things like corrupt political systems, institutionalized injustice, or enduring cultural hatreds. Not because humans are innocent, but because a fallen force behind the scenes may still be shaping the structure. Some even believe that these former principalities present themselves as gods, spirits, or ideologies, whatever the culture will accept, just to maintain control. And unlike demons, they don't always stir chaos. Many of them create the illusion of order, stability, and prosperity, just enough to keep people complacent, obedient, and disconnected from the truth. Fallen principalities don't lose their power overnight, but they do lose their purpose, and that, more than anything else, is their downfall. While principalities are often linked to nations and rulers, their influence isn't limited to kings and empires. Many theologians, especially in early Christianity, believed these angels also held sway over the spiritual governance of the church itself. Not just individual churches, but the church as a global institution. According to thinkers like Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite and later Thomas Aquinas, the principalities were responsible for ensuring that the spiritual structure of the church mirrored the divine order of heaven. Just as they oversee the moral direction of nations, they also help maintain balance, discipline, and faithfulness within religious leadership. It was believed that certain principalities were assigned to oversee bishops, religious councils, and even entire regions of the Christian world. These weren't guardian angels in the personal sense, but rather guardians of sacred order, preventing doctrine from straying and leadership from collapsing under corruption. When a new diocese was formed, when a major church council gathered, or when missionaries expanded into new lands, the hand of a principality may have been at work, preparing hearts, aligning decisions, or protecting the sanctity of the effort. They didn't dictate theology, but they could inspire clarity, reinforce unity, or push against internal corruption. However, this influence wasn't guaranteed. Just as with earthly governments, spiritual institutions could fall out of alignment with the divine will. When that happened, it was believed a principality might step back, or in tragic cases, be replaced by something darker. The idea of principalities watching over the church carried a sense of sacred weight. It meant that leadership wasn't just a human responsibility. It was a cosmic trust. To lead others in faith was to stand under the quiet gaze of a being tasked with preserving divine order, not through force, not through fear, but through example, conviction, and humility. And when leadership faltered, when faith became theater, Or when power overtook purpose, well, heaven noticed. And so did the principalities. Whether through correction, withdrawal, or replacement, these angels played a quiet role in the health of the church across centuries. Their job wasn't to preach or prophesy, but to stabilize, to safeguard, to govern the governors of the faithful. When it comes to the apocalypse, the end times described in the book of Revelation, most attention falls on the archangels, the four horsemen, or the great spiritual battles that unfold in the heavens and on earth. But hidden beneath all that drama is a quieter question. What happens to the angels who were assigned to the nations? What becomes of the principalities? While Revelation doesn't name them directly, many scholars believe that the principalities still play a part, just not one that's front and center. These angels, having watched over kingdoms and institutions for millennia, are not forgotten in the final reckoning. They are evaluated, they are reassigned, and in some cases, they are removed. In apocalyptic theology, there's a growing belief that when Christ returns and the nations are judged, each principality will be held accountable for how faithfully they carried out their divine mandate. Those who remained aligned with God's will, who quietly guided civilizations toward justice, compassion, and truth, may be preserved. But those who turned a blind eye, who enabled tyranny or fostered idolatry, will face consequences along with the nations they were meant to serve. This echoes earlier hints found in books like Daniel, where the princes of Persia and Greece, likely fallen principalities, stood in direct opposition to heaven's plans. In the final days, those same types of beings may once again rise up, clinging to worldly power even as divine judgment sweeps across the earth. Some traditions suggest that the withdrawal of holy principalities may actually be a sign of the end, a spiritual abandonment of systems too far gone to salvage. When their presence disappears, chaos rises unchecked, empires collapse into confusion, and what's left behind is exposed to judgment. On the other hand, faithful principalities may assist in the final restoration of order. Once the great purging of evil is complete, they could be tasked with rebuilding the divine structure, guiding the new heavens and new earth with a renewed sense of purpose, this time without the interference of corruption. Their story doesn't end in war or fire. It ends in accountability. In Revelation, the nations are judged, not just by their armies or economies, but by their hearts. And the principalities assigned to them, whether they elevated or sabotaged those hearts, will not be exempt. They were the quiet rulers behind the rulers, and in the end, they too will stand before the throne. They don't lead heavenly armies. They don't descend with flaming swords or open the skies with fanfare. Principalities operate in silence, in patience, in structure. And yet, their role is one of the most enduring and far-reaching in all of angelic lore. Their influence doesn't make headlines, but their absence is often felt when a kingdom crumbles, when injustice becomes law, or when institutions rot from within. And when they do act, when they withdraw favor, stir a righteous movement, or whisper into the heart of a leader, it can shift the course of history itself. They remind us that not all divine work is loud or immediate. Some of it is slow, layered, long-lasting. Principalities were created not to dazzle but to stabilize, not to dominate but to guide. They are the bridge between heaven's law and earth's leaders, a role that demands wisdom, detachment, and a vision that stretches far beyond a single generation. And in the end, when all nations have stood before the throne and the final judgments are passed, even the principalities will be called to account. Some will be honored, others will be cast down, but all will have played a role in the unfolding story of heaven's design and earth's fragile dance with power, faith, and free will.